order. Today is December the 3rd. This is our regular meeting, 6 o'clock here in the boardroom. And as we do, we're going to start our meeting with a prayer. And I got Father Rob Ballman from Ave Maria Catholic Church saying a prayer tonight. And he's also got St. Alphonsus in Covington. He's just been with us about 6 months now, but Father Ballman is originally from Wynn, Arkansas, and he's a big Razorback fan. Come on up here, Father Ballman.
Nobody's perfect.
Let us pray. We hear in the first chapter of Deuteronomy, Moses speaking to the people of Israel. Lord your God has made you numerous, and now you are as numerous as the stars of the heavens. May the Lord, the God of your ancestors, increase you 1,000 times over and bless you as he promised. But how can I, by myself, bear the weight, the contentiousness of you? Provide wise, discerning, and reputable persons for each of your tribes, that I may appoint them as your leaders. You answered me, what you have proposed is good. So I took the leaders of your tribes, wise and reputable, and set them as leaders over you, commanders over thousands, over hundreds, over 50s, over 10s, and other tribal officers. Let us pray. Good and gracious God, bless these men and women that you have chosen to govern. Bless them, fill them with your grace and wisdom, that they may lead courageously the people that have elected them. Bless this great city, protect it, keep it always safe, keep it always close to your loving heart, that it may be kept in peace, and that it may flourish with the many graces and blessings that you wish to bestow upon it. Keep the families that it represents always close to you, protect them, and let them always walk in peace as your children. We ask all this in the name of Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Let's remain standing for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for being here tonight. See how your local government works. Hopefully everyone had a good Thanksgiving and kind of back to the road recovery, getting ready for the Christmas season. Of course, the board, I had Father Martin up here that was here as a predecessor to Father Rob, and of course he's in Paris now and is doing well up there, but we're enjoying Father Rob. Okay, the first item on the agenda, appreciate everyone being here tonight. Consider the November 5th, 2018 minutes as printed and delivered in the agenda package. I need a motion. Ms. Alston makes the motion. Second, was that you, Mr. Beard? Yes. Mr. Beard made the second. Discussion. Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Ms. Alston?
Yes.
Mr. Hankins?
Yes.
Mr. Chibnall?
Yes.
And I forgot to mention, Ms. Treadway won't be here tonight. She had something she had to do in pertinence to her work, so she's involved with that, so we gave her regards, but she won't be here tonight. Second item, consider the November 2018 financial statement as printed and delivered in the agenda package.
Second.
Mr. Hankins makes the motion, Mr. Chibnall the second. Discussion. I had a little question on there, Ms. Donna.
Yes.
The rabies account was up. Any particular reason for that? He was above budget at this point, and I thought that was a little unusual unless we purchased some.
Well, of course, the insurance is paid,
Okay.
and that's for the entire year. the liability in workers' comp.
Mr. Chipman?
Yes.
Mr. Hankins?
Yes.
Ms. Alston?
Yes.
Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Okay. Correspondence? No correspondence. Consider certificate of compliance retail package store renewal application for Mr. Thomas Timms, City Liquor of Ripley, 787 Highway 51 North, Ripley, Tennessee, 38063. Did he do what he was supposed to do?
Yes, sir.
No change in ownership, anything like that?
No change.
I'll make
This
the
is just
motion, Mayor,
renewal.
second.
Okay, Mr. Chipman made the motion, Ms. Smith. Hankins, the second. Of course, he wanted to get on the agenda last month. Did he ever have to close down for a month? Of course, that was ABC's call.
That's right. No, sir, he did not.
Mr. Chipman?
Yes.
Mr. Hankins?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Ms. Alston?
Yes.
Consider contract agreement between Community Development Partners, LLC, and City of Ripley to provide professional and technical assistance for the 2018 CDBG sewer system project. That was that $500,000 check that Mr. Davis's department received. Did you want to elaborate any on that, Mr. Davis?
Not really. We're just in the process of getting everything secured. So when we can start the work, we'll start the work. I make the motion that we approve that.
Yeah, Mr. Davis makes the motion, Mr. Hankins second. Any further discussion?
Everything has a lot of paperwork, and this is just part of it, of the grant.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Ms. Alston?
Yes.
Mr. Hankins?
Yes.
Mr. Chipman?
Yes.
Okay. Consider resolution authorizing the City of Ripley to participate in a public entity partners previously known as TML Risk Management Pool Property Conservation Matching Grant Program. Have we been involved with this all along? It's just a difference in the name change?
Well, this is applying, it's a $2,500 grant.
Okay.
There's no match. It's just 100%.
What's one used for?
The eligible items were like for cameras and for instance, like the cameras that we purchased for the park or in the fire department. All I have to do is show reimbursement and they'll fund us the $2,500. So the money has already been spent.
Okay.
No new.
No, new.
So we need to okay it tonight. I need a motion. Ms. Alston makes the motion. Mr. Davis, second. Any further discussion? Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Ms. Alston?
Yes.
Mr. Chipman?
Yes.
Mr. Hankins?
Yes.
Okay. Consider to award DC Construction and Trucking Incorporated, Brownsville, Tennessee, a contract for 2018 STG grant, that's Site Development Grant that we got, Walker East Industrial Park Improvement in the amount of $220,880 as recommended by A2H and approved by Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development. Was anybody local?
There was a local
Yeah, there
contractor
was
that
one
did.
contractor did it.
SCD fund.
Do we know anything about,
I do.
are they capable?
He's a good, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there was a wide range in the bids,
Yeah.
about $115,000 difference.
Is this job require a bond? Did I make the motion to accept his bid, the lowest bid?
Okay, Mr. Chipman makes the motion. I need a second. Mr. Hankins makes the second. Of course, that grant was $413,000, I think. So we've got other things, of course, and they're gonna have a beautiful sign out there for that industrial park. So hopefully we'll get on track and put an industry in on some of that acreage. Mr. Hankins?
Yes.
Mr. Chipman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Alston?
Yes.
Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Okay. Consider approval of contract with Lauderdale County government to bring forfeiture suit and to sell surplus property. How much surplus property is that?
3 vehicles. 3 vehicles.
Oh, 3
Yeah,
vehicles. Okay. I need a motion on that.
So moved.
Mr. Hankins makes the motion, Ms. Alston the second. Do we need to have an auction in the near future, Donna?
That's, keep going down the list.
Okay.
It's
I
on
did
there.
read my agenda.
It's on there.
3 up from the bottom.
Maybe I didn't comprehend it all. Okay. Can I get a motion in a second?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Ms. Alston?
Yes.
Mr. Chibnall?
Yes.
Mr. Hankins?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Consider to authorize sale of surplus property at public auction.
So moved.
Mr. Chairman makes the motion. Mr. Beard, second. I skipped one, didn't I? We'll go back.
Are we talking about 3 vehicles, that what we're referring to on this?
At least the first 2 items
Well,
there,
the
yes.
first 2 would be, well, the one he skipped was the one that goes with the 3 vehicles.
Okay. We'll go back to that one too.
That's all we're talking
Well,
about is,
but then the next item is our normal surplus property, vehicles that are out of service. That's a separate line item.
okay.
The first sale of surplus property line item deals with property that was seized by law enforcement and subject to judicial forfeiture.
Okay.
The second sale of surplus property is surplus property that came to the city by other means. It's
And-
property that the city already owned.
Well, I got it on our surplus property, if we're on that. I've
We
got a
skipped
question.
that one.
Well,
Or no, well,
the motion that you have right now is to consider this, to authorize the sale of surplus property at public auction. That is our city vehicles that are out of service. That would be property that has been seized by law enforcement agencies and awarded to us by way of Department of Safety, not by judicial forfeiture.
Well, I'll just be specific what I'm
Okay.
getting at. At the previous, well, not the previous one, but the last auction or 2 that we had with surplus property, our animal control officer had gone to a smaller vehicle. And he sold those big dog pens that we have that he carries in the back of his truck. We sold it for pennies on the dollar.
yeah.
Now, he's gone back to a big vehicle, and we had to buy new dog carriers again at full price, rather than being able to buy them pennies on the dollar. Now, that smaller dog pen or catcher, whatever you want to call it, is sitting out there like it's going to be surplus property, and I know once again, we're going to sell it pennies on the dollar. What's wrong with putting that in storage rather than selling it? It's not going to deteriorate. And whatever happens if we go back to a smaller vehicle, guess what we're going to be doing? We're going to be selling big dog pens and buying another new little dog pen. Now, we're not talking about a few $100s, but gee whiz, that's a few $100s of taxpayer money. I'd like to ask if we're going to consider selling surplus property, that we leave that item out of it.
Oh, yeah. We can do that, can't we?
Certainly.
Oh, yeah,
You don't
sure.
have to sell any.
No.
We make that as part of this motion, or is it
Or
amendment to this
put-
motion, or how?
As
Or put a
such-
minimum bid on some of these items or
As
something.
such, it wouldn't be deemed surplus if it is, has a possible use.
It's got possible use down the
I
road.
think there is a minimum bid on this property, isn't it, Mr. Don?
Well,
Now, we're not talking about
We're not
real
talking
estate, we're talking
We're not
about,
talking about real estate.
have you ever been to one of our city surplus auctions?
Well, I know-
We give it away.
Equipment, vehicles, equipment, things like that.
No, I know what it is, but I didn't know if we had
Normally,
some figure to start at.
we do not, Mr. Chibnall. What I normally do is I ask Mr. Ford, what do we need to start at?
Started out on,
Yeah, isn't that correct, Mr. Ford? Yeah, he's my right-hand man. I ask him, but sometimes things slip through. like Mr. Davis is talking about, and of course, I question the rabies account, and maybe that's one of the reasons.
Agree with you on that one, Mayor.
Yeah, we'll pull that one and hold it, because we might go to another vehicle next month, who knows? But let's go ahead, we got a motion and a second, any other discussion on this one? I consider authorized sale of surplus property at public auction. Ms. Alston?
Yes.
Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes,
Mr. Chipman?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hankins?
Yes.
Okay, now I'll go back. Consider sale of surplus property acquired by judicial forfeiture pursuant to Tennessee Code 40-33-107, and Counselor, you said that was?
That would be the three vehicles that were acquired by judicial forfeiture, where you're entering into contract with the county for their authority to sell those vehicles.
I need a motion on that. Ms. Alston makes the
I'll
motion.
say,
Mr. Davis, second. Any further discussion on that?
are we talking about the three vehicles that are parked, backed up to the fence?
I don't know.
They're run by
Ms.
the-
Ford, is that correct?
Well, one is, an Oldsmobile Delta 88, I believe.
That'd be a good one for my wife.
Well, you may buy.
Did they-
A
I'm
1997
saying, did they-
F-150 truck and a 1989 Mercury
What's the county?
Grand Marquis.
Okay, those are three separate vehicles.
That's what I'm gonna ask.
Okay,
This is it right here.
I've been looking for it, I've misplaced it.
And there's some vehicles out there that are not, that won't be sold by the city. They're BTF's vehicles, I believe,
Okay,
that have been out there for a while.
And, Ms. Jackson, may I ask if I may, that you just clarify for me, again, the connection between the county and the city with this agreement
Sure.
and the property? Did they seize it? Do we seize it? What?
We seized it, and that's our interest in these three vehicles. Law enforcement agencies routinely, as part of criminal actions, seize properties.
Right.
And with these three vehicles in particular, the Ripley Police Department seized these and were awarded these by judicial forfeiture as part of a criminal proceeding. State law provides that those can be sold as surplus property by the county sheriff. There's no provision for the city or any other governmental entity.
That's the clarification I was looking for. I didn't know what the deal was.
But the county and city have the ability to contract with one another through the Tennessee Interlocal Cooperation Act to exercise those authorities concurrently. So they're giving us their authority to exercise that sale because they don't have any financial interest in that property.
Okay, well, I just wasn't clear on the exact connection. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And this will be on the county's agenda
Agenda
for
Correct. This
December,
month.
for next
Next
week,
week.
next month.
no big
Do we have a motion yet?
Yeah.
Yes, and a second.
Yes, right. we're-
Everyone understand what we're doing now?
Got you. Got you.
Mr. Hankins?
Yes.
Mr. Chipman?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Davis?
Yes,
Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Ms. Alston? Okay. Okay, consider Ripley Power and Light Board appointment, 4-year term beginning January of 2019. You all got in your packet the applicants. Mr. Jenkins is on that board currently, and I'm recommending him stay on that board for 4 more years.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Hankins makes the motion, and Mr. Chipman makes the second. Discussion.
I made the motion due to the fact that Mr. Eunice is already on there, has experience with the Power and Light Board, knows how things are running pretty smooth, and obviously has support of the Ripley Power and Light Board. And that's why I made the motion. That's
Normally, that's the direction we go. Someone's on the board, they stay on the board.
nothing against the other applicant whatsoever.
No. I'll say this much about Mr. Jenkins. I've been involved a long time with city government, and he goes out and checks these lights for me, and I think his wife is going with him to do some of the checking. I think they're sick of me calling him and wearing them out, but he does a very good job at what he's supposed to do, representing us and representing the constituency in this city. Any other discussion? Seeing that that's your department, Mr. Beard, I'm gonna have you vote first. Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Ms. Alston,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Chipman,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hankins,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. Congratulations, Mr. Jenkins, 4 more years.
Thank you.
Is it a 4-year term or 5? Okay. Okay. Consider to approve all full-time employees 2% Christmas bonus as budgeted.
So moved.
I'll make,
Oh, everybody wants my vote. We all make a motion unanimously.
you got me.
You can have the second, Billy, go ahead.
I'll second it.
Ms. Alston made the motion, Mr. Chipman second. I didn't even get to fire the starting gun.
Always a fight.
Just begun.
This
False
goes
start.
on every year, Mayor.
You know, it's not live, it's not on TV anymore.
I got to give the rest of the board some input if they want to say anything. Mr. Davis, you want to say anything?
Yes.
Mr. Beard?
Thank you, sir.
Okay. And you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Alston?
Yes.
Mr. Hankins?
I vote yes, and we appreciate the job our employees do for us.
Mr. Chipman?
Yes, sir.
And I'll vote yes too. So when will they, that gets everything on the first page? So when will they expect to get this, or when will they?
Before the 15th.
Before the 15th of December. So I know in past years that's been a question. Okay. So that is on the record there around the 15th. Consider MTAS, that's got to be on the first page, doesn't it? Okay. Consider MTAS police fire consultant Rex Barton's response regarding his rating of our applicants for chief of police. You all got from Ms. Jackson, our counselor, her statement to y'all, and it said that, you know, if you needed further discussion with her, to contact her on an individual basis and talk to her one-on-one. You know, I don't know who has talked to her, if anybody has. And I'll let Ms. Jackson start first because she got the correspondence from Rex Barton, and then we'll discuss it here amongst the board.
We
Counselor.
forwarded the resumes and applications for the entire pool of applicants for chief of police to Rex Barton, who is the police and fire consultant for MTAS. And of course, the board voted back in September to allow him, at no expense to the city, to use his expertise to rate the applicants for police chief and to determine their qualifications and to address any concerns or comments that he had. And he came back to us with a very strong opinion that of the entire pool, he felt that there were only 2 qualified applicants. And he advised that it was his opinion and his recommendation that the city conduct a second round of advertising to increase the size of the pool of applicants. And that is because he felt that 2 candidates would not make for a sufficient interview process. I went back to him for clarification of that and said, if the board were to decide to go forward with the existing pool of applicants and not advertise, what would your recommendation be about? And and his response came back very firmly. His recommendation is to advertise for a larger pool of applicants. He does not feel that this is a large enough pool of qualified applicants. At this juncture, of course, you are relying on his experience and his expertise in making that recommendation. He is coming at this from a position which, of course, has no political influence or bias of any kind. And he was clear that he felt that the city would be best served by investing investing the minimal expense of another round of advertising and taking that additional time in order to get a good round of applicants for the process.
Okay, let's see what feedback we have from the board up here. I'll start with you, Mr. Hankins, seeing that you're the liaison with that department.
Okay, well, I've been studying this whole situation for quite some time, as you may understand. And one thing I want to mention right off the bat is that, with no disrespect to Mr. Barton with the process, it's my experience that once you stop doing a thing, your knowledge and current experience of that thing kind of stops right there. Mr. Barton was an officer who reached the rank of captain at Athens, Tennessee. I believe he was there 17 years, as I recall, and that was 25 years ago. He went to work for MTAS. So he's been doing the consulting thing for 25 years, more so than just doing the law enforcement thing. That's something that we need to consider and think about. Again, no disrespect to Mr. Barton by any stretch of the imagination, but for years I was in radio, and I stopped being in radio in 2001. I was really good at it at the time, made some good money doing it, but my expertise in radio, while you could call me an expert because I have over 30 years experience in it, my expertise in radio is somewhat limited because I haven't been involved with it in the last, well, since 2001, 16, 17 years or better. So radio is different now than it was 17 years ago, and it's my opinion that law enforcement is probably a whole lot different now than it was 25 years ago, the last time Mr. Barton was in it. I'm not saying to discount Mr. Barton's suggestion, and as long as, and I'm not necessarily have a problem with that, as long as we are not eliminating anybody or any people from the first group of folks and we're just adding to it, that's one thing. But if we're going to get rid of those other applicants and then start new ones, that would be something else altogether. He didn't suggest that, correct?
No, that's correct. You would be looking for additional qualified candidates.
So at worst, basically, we're just postponing our situation more so than anything else.
Correct. And improving the field of candidates. He also suggested that in order to attract additional qualified candidates, that you consider increasing the salary. I know that's problematic for the city.
That's a real problem.
Exactly, because
You want the job, you don't want the job, here's how much you pay.
Well, and you have issues too with equity between your other department heads. So that's not something, you've all been aware of that, I think, since the initial email. But
Yeah, I just missed that too.
Mr. Barton has, of course, remained involved with the field, and not only is he fluent in Tennessee law as it relates to law enforcement and fire, but he's remained in the field and he has worked with departments consistently throughout his career, so he's never left the field. And part of what the city is attempting to do here is to improve your result. And to improve the result, you have to improve the process.
In general, I don't have any deal, like I said, I'm not so opposed as long as we're not
No,
eliminating any prior
he's
applicants.
not suggesting that. He's just concerned that with only 2 qualified, in his opinion, applicants, that it's not a large enough pool for the interview process.
Okay, let me mention this also, that we put together an interview committee with your help and with Ms. Donna's help and all of our help, of some people who are highly qualified.
Correct.
And highly experienced and have many years more than just Mr. Barton by himself.
Correct.
So I also, I have some ideas we might need to let this interview committee look at who they've got already first before we necessarily start the process all over again.
Well, you could
Just a
do that,
suggestion.
and I suppose it's a question of the chicken and the egg, because his intention here is that you're going to have the interview committee come in initially and look at the qualified candidates. He rates them for purposes of the initial proposal to the interview committee. So they would be looking at who he deemed qualified candidates.
Well, I think we should let the interview committee look at the candidates they have already, make a decision
Well,
themselves,
and
and see if that lines up with what Mr. Barton said.
of course, the initial discussion too was that he would meet with them and he would discuss not only the field of candidates, but he would discuss with them the interview process. So he will continue to be involved in that, and most of the people who you selected for the interview committee were of his recommendation. So he will have no problem with doing that. But in terms of determining, you're correct, who the qualified candidates are and who will be granted an interview, that will be up to the interview committee. But he's coming in with a recommendation to them, and to you all, but to them, because they're the ones who'll ultimately be considering who to grant interviews to, that in his opinion, there are only 2 qualified candidates. They can certainly look at the field and decide that, but he just says that, you know, if those are the only 2 qualified candidates, it's not a large enough pool for a good interview experience. So all the city has at risk here is a little bit of time and additional expense at another round of interviews to potentially bring in additional qualified candidates. There may not be any, but there may be, and you benefit by that. There's nothing to be lost in the interim.
We advertised, what, in the government papers, local papers, Dyersburg, Haywood County,
Some kind of statewide trade or something like that?
We did the Jackson Sun.
Jackson Sun.
The Tennessee Town and Cities, the Tennessee Law Enforcement,
We spent, what, roughly $1,000 in advertising cost,
more.
There's a pretty
More
wide
than that.
scope of advertisement with that.
and we got no applicants from Madison County.
And let me add also that due to the last couple of years and the situations with the police department the last couple of years in the city, it doesn't exactly make this a glowing job that we're going to be wanting to take anyway, in my opinion. I don't like
Now,
it because I know
if I could have
it's
finished, Mr. Hankins, where I was going, why do we want to spend more dollars in the same publications with no result or getting the same result? It would be my thought, if we're gonna truly advertise, to go deeper or utilize some of the free advertising that we can get statewide. I mean, we all get this publication right here,
It was advertised in that. It was
and we got
advertised
nothing
on-
out of that.
No, sir, it was
I'm
advertised
just wondering if free
in the
advertising
past.
is worth the expense it's gonna be for the results that we'll get.
I did a national minority paper.
What was,
The reality is, Mr. Davis, that you really don't know until you do it, and that's the unfortunate side of it, is you don't know until you've spent the money what result you will get out of it. It's just difficult when this is the person who routinely deals with law enforcement agencies across the state and who knows the process and knows what qualifications are meaningful. It's his recommendation. This is the expert, the advisor, the consultant that you're looking to for his recommendation. You don't have to take it. It's just, that is the unfortunate side of it, is that you don't know until you spend the money what will come of it.
what was the salary that we advertised?
59, sure, where I quote that, I believe it was at 59.
Sir,
60, I think.
how much?
Close to 60, isn't it?
It's close to 60, I
Okay.
think it had a certain number in there.
What? Okay, right at 60.
No, I'm sorry, it's 57,491.
57,491. Pretty good salary in Ripley, Tennessee. I am not for increasing the salary. You're either gonna come with this if you're out there or you're not.
Besides, you know, somebody's coming just for the money anyway. If you don't-
Well, we've got department heads that do a heck of a job for us, and their pay is right in this category here. And we're gonna bring somebody in here maybe and pay them more than we've got people that are making now and are doing a good job for us. We don't know what kind of job someone's gonna do anyway, really. I mean, some people fall on their face, and others will do more than you thought they were gonna do.
Well, I'm not gonna vote for the increase unless it's across the board of every department head. And you know good and well, we can't afford that, so that's where I stand on that.
And on anything else, do you stand, Mr. Chidman?
I don't, you know, Mayor, I don't know what to say. I think that this, I don't know Mr. Barton, I've met him. I don't know his qualifications like Mr. Hankins does. But I will say this, we have got him to do a lot of work for us. And it looks like he's made a recommendation, and we can take either one or two. we can go back and advertise again, or we can take his two top candidates and send them before the committee and let them make a decision.
Ms. Dunn,
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Beery.
did we do a research on what the counties advertise, getting for salaries for each chief?
After, well, definitely after Mr. Barton came back with that recommendation, I did check with a few, and there's, for instance, Brownsville is right at the same salary. Theirs is between 57 and 58. That was the figure I was quoted in Brownsville. Newbern's is 65, but Atoka is 66 right now, but they just raised all of their department heads
They got a whole lot more money.
July 1 of this year, 15%. So June 30th of this year, their police chief was making 57,391. So it was just like ours, but they did their entire department heads 15%. So that would be the same sense as where we are right now.
I don't feel like there's any issue with our salary. I'm not necessarily opposed to trying to get some more applicants for it by any stretch of imagination. But I feel strongly that we have a very strong interview committee. We should approach them with this, let them look at the candidates just as we've let Mr. Barton look at the candidates, see what they think about it. That would be my suggestion.
How many applicants did we get?
We received 8.
8.
And 2 were,
Only,
we're talking about 6. I mean, 2 were,
only 2 he deemed qualified.
but I was thinking we were talking about interviewing possibly 6, that there were 2 that were taken off the list.
Well, there was 2 that were ineligible for, but they did not meet, I don't know, there was 2. Yes, there was 2 that were
Excluded from consideration
Right.
because one had a contractual obligation to never apply for employment with the city again. And another one had left the city's employment at an earlier time in bad standing, and pursuant to the personnel policy, they are ineligible for rehire in any position.
So we had 8 to submit with only 6 that were eligible, that met the guidelines of hiring, which
So
was.
Mr. Barton looked at 6.
That's correct.
2 were disqualified before
And
they
they
got
were
to him.
informed as soon as they were received, those 2 that were excluded.
Go ahead, Mr. Beard.
What, now, what are we saying wrong with the 2 that we have?
The 2 applicants that he said are
Yes,
qualified,
that he said is qualified.
other than he felt the pool was too small. Only 2 applicants were.
Not enough to choose from.
Right.
And Mr. Beard, let me say additionally, that he also expressed, even as to the 2 qualified candidates, he had concerns that he expressed about them. He just didn't feel that this was either a large enough nor a strong enough pool of candidates. So he had concerns about even the 2 he deemed qualified.
How long did we run those ads the first time, Ms. Donna?
Was
Was it like 3 weeks or something? I'm trying to
I think
remember.
I can tell you. I believe it, was like, the, on September, I sent it on September the 21st, and the resumes were to be accepted until October 31st, so over a month.
I know one thing, this has been the most extensive search we've ever done for a department head, and I've been up here 30 years. I mean, we've never gone to this
Another thing I'll mention is that we don't need to be in any rush because the department is in very capable hands as it is right now. So I don't think we have to necessarily try to rush to do this. We want to be sure that we do it right, whatever that is, on behalf of everybody in the city and the protection thereof. So I don't see any reason to rush. And for that matter, there's less than 2 years left in this term. When you think about it, there'll be a whole new board here in less than 2 years, possibly. Might want to let them make the decision on the form more permanent chief. So I suppose you also could leave things like they are until the next term if you want to use that as an option also. We're in no rush. And nobody up here needs to be rushed.
It's not a rush, but we're still, how many, office we need now?
Well, we're better. We've got 3 hired. Mr. Lynn, how many are we still down?
We had 3 hired, we lost 1, so we're looking at 5.
We're still 5 now. That's better. We're still having 12-hour shifts. But all the officers are cooperating. Everybody seems to understand that. And things are moving much smoother over the police department now.
Are we gonna advertise again then, or what?
Yes, sir. After the first of the year.
That's the plan. Yes, sir. First.
Anything else from you, Mr. Davis?
No, not really.
Okay, Miss Alston, you've been contemplating there.
I'm still contemplating.
I don't want to, I know you have something to explain. I just want to say that Mr. Hankins is right. There doesn't have to be a rush here. But I did want to say, I don't want you all to overlook the fact that you've enlisted the commitment of a very competent interview committee to assist with this process. And if you do not pursue the process now, we don't know who will be willing to enlist in it in the future. These recommendations again came from Mr. Barton, and Mayor, you were familiar with several of them, and fortunately, all of them who were asked agreed to commit to the interview committee, to serve on the interview committee at no cost to the city. So that is something to consider in the short term.
And that's one reason I wanted to consider showing those 6 applicants, the whole pool that we got to this interview committee, let them go from there too. See if they came to the same results and same decisions as Mr. Martin did. We've got them there, they're willing to look at it. Why not use that, Lord knows, 100 and whatever years experience in police and management and the cities to take a peek at it.
I did send Attorney Jackson and asked you, you know, what.
Yes, you did consult with me about, yeah. And essentially, we've exchanged the same sentiment that has happened here tonight.
Looking at the job that's interim chief Gould is doing now, you know, we've not heard a lot of bad things or a lot of things that's going on, but I'm kind of like Alderman Chipman. I'm not for an increase unless it's across the whole board. That's just the way I feel. I'm
I'm against that completely.
We can't do that. Listen to
This is the
everybody.
job, this is what it
You're talking
offers.
about 5 department heads. There's Bucker here at City Hall and Public Works and Fire Chief and Parks and Recreation. And we know what our monies are.
All right, Mayor, do we carry this thing forward and interview the top 2, or do we just interview what's left, everybody that's applied, and let the interview committee make their decision? Is that what everybody wants to do?
Well, your choice, or what I suppose is being considered here, are really one of 3 things. Either you take Mr. Barton's recommendation and you advertise again, you spend the money and take the time to advertise again to determine whether you can increase the pool of qualified candidates.
Just increase, not replace, right?
Correct. Or you move forward with the current slate of candidates. Let Mr. Barton and the interview committee meet. They'll hear his recommendations. They'll consider those themselves. They'll be aware of what the slate is, It's just that he will be meeting with them to discuss the interview process and his recommendations. So obviously, they'll have input on that too, or you maintain the status quo. And the board has already determined at an earlier time to move forward. So what you have at hand now is a very qualified interview committee committed to help the city with the process at no cost.
Well, I'll make a motion that we send the 6 candidates before that interview committee, at least to look at them, not necessarily try to talk to them. Let those 6 candidates go before that interview board we put together, and let those people look at it before they hear or whatever Mr. Barton's recommendations, and see what they come up with out of those 6.
Okay. You got a motion here, do I have a second?
Leave a
Well,
motion
you
out
already voted though back in September to have Mr. Barton rate and to furnish that to the interview committee.
there. Well, that's fine, I'm going to, but all 6 of them rather than just 2.
Oh, they'll be made aware of the
Right,
entire
that's-
slate.
That's the main
His
thing I'm after.
recommendation is just going to be,
Now, if we need to set up something where they actually meet with any of them or anything like that, or Mr.
That would
Barton
be
meets
up
with
to
them,
them.
I don't really care about that, but I want the interview committee to know about all 6 of the candidates eligible that we have.
yes, and they'll determine then who is,
That's kind of what my
Well,
next,
the interview.
that's what I want my motion to say. My motion is to have these 6 candidates be introduced in one way or another, whether it's just by paper or resumes or whatever, to the interview committee.
Let them do it.
Mr. Barton not charging anything.
no,
No,
sir.
sir.
No. We already picked them.
Y'all understand that motion, that send it to the interview, and Mr. Barton will be involved
Yes,
with this?
Right.
yes.
Yeah. So I need a second on that motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Davis seconds the motion. Read the motion, Ms. Donna, please. Okay.
They're trying.
Motion to send 6 candidates to be forwarded to the interview committee.
And they proceed as they will.
Dean? Yes, sir.
When are we gonna contact this interview committee? When them and Mr. Barton can get together?
The interview committee as such has agreed, and they're on hold until a
Okay.
date
Correct. I notified them
of the delay.
of the delay, and you're considering this tonight instead of proceeding in early December as well, or in early November as well.
Attorney Jackson, you notified Mr. Barton?
The interview
The
committee,
interview committee.
yes. When we had consulted with each of them earlier, we anticipated the only delay would be between the close of the application period and Mr. Barton's recommendation. Once we had that, we would be submitting that to them. And of course, when his recommendation was then that the board do something more, then we notified them that the matter would be tabled temporarily while the board considered that.
And they were all okay with it.
Yes.
For the people that are here tonight that don't know who our committee is, tell them who our committee is, review committee. I mean, I can help you.
Chief Lewis from Covington, Chief Poole from Atoka,
The chief of police of Covington, the chief of police of Atoka,
Ms. Lewis, who is the city manager of Atoka,
kind of what Ms.
Clay
Donna
Newman of the
does.
Lauderdale County Sheriff's Department, a representative of the District Attorney's Office.
And retired assistant chief Tom
Yes,
Sanders.
and Mr. Sanders would be, as Rex indicated, not only someone with prior experience, but a community representative.
That's our 6.
Well, it's my understanding that we, as aldermen, we can't participate in the interview, but we can listen to the interviews.
Oh, absolutely.
You can observe.
And that's what I'd like to do, to see what Queen Ryan